All right, welcome back to another episode of Path of Purpose. Today I have my guest, or our guest, Justin Clifford. Justin Clifford is the CEO at Bereave. Justin, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Of course, Jason. Thanks for having me.
All right, Justin, would you mind just giving the audience just a brief kind of introduction of who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah. I again, Justin Clifford. My title is the CEO of Bereave. We are a 3-person startup located in Indianapolis, Indiana, working on changing the way we experience death. For a light topic today for you. So what I do at Bereave is a little bit of everything, as a 3-person company does. Everything from the sales and marketing stuff to dipping into finance and strategic planning and operations and working with customers and a little bit of everything at this stage.
How did you get involved with Bereave?
Great question. So 2 of the 3 co-founders of Bereave started the company because they lost parents prematurely, and they had been working on it a little bit, and I just happened to be taking a professional break at the time they were looking for somebody with my skill set. And one of the co-founders and I run in very similar circles, have very similar set of friends, but had never actually crossed paths. And through a series of introductions, ended up having a conversation with him, one of our advisors and investors who had also experienced premature loss of a parent. And really, I mean, the way I describe it is I started my career as a teacher, right? And I did so because I'm a very intrinsically motivated person for some reason. Impact is a big word and it has big meaning for me. And when I heard about not just the loss of these parents, but everything, all the impediments to peacefully navigating the loss of a very close loved one, and heard these particular stories, it just felt like those journeys were not fair.
Mm.
And if you're going to throw anything in front of me and you want me to do something, just frame it in the way that it's not fair, because I'll probably jump at trying to help. And it just turned out that this was a very intrinsically motivating company, with a reach that really is perpetually endless. And one of the things that I felt as I was contemplating taking on this role is that I would look around as I was in busy places and crowded places, and I started to think, like, this work could literally touch every human being. Now, we're not naive to think we will by ourselves, but the problem is big enough that, like, we can definitely start chipping away at helping people in really what amounts to their time of greatest need.
Would you say, like, out of your entire career, would you say that at this point, like, do you feel like this is the most meaningful cause that you're working towards?
It's a great question. I think each of my stops in my career have been very meaningful for a lot of different reasons. I can't tell you that this is more meaningful than teaching second graders, right? Maybe it is. That was a really meaningful thing for me. I can't tell you that this is more meaningful than helping 30 salespeople on a team that I led with their careers. That it's
Yeah.
more meaningful. But I will say that it feels really meaningful, and it allows me to get up in the morning with excitement. It allows me to really, really get involved in this business and really feel like my work has purpose.
Yeah.
So, where it ranks, I don't know. Maybe time will tell. But today it certainly feels impactful for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also in the last phrase that you said, I feel like there's something there too about how like today it feels impactful, and like how
Hmm.
it's almost like each day, it's even though it's the same venture, it sounds like it's each day is still a you're still doing a different thing like every day essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you are. I mean, like you can look at my DMs on LinkedIn. I, I mean, not a day goes by where we don't receive multiple DMs with people telling us their stories of loss, unprompted from strangers. And I've got a laundry list, just such a long list of stories that I could tell, from strangers that have just opened up, in a DM and told us about their journey. Sometimes saying, thanking us for existing to some degree, which
Yeah.
is wild. Or, we've got a huge bench of future candidates for when we start to
Yeah.
hire, because people are drawn to the mission. So every day we wake up to, like, at minimum that, right?
Yeah.
And you can feel the impact, and it can become heavy at times, but you can
Hmm.
feel the impact on a daily basis. And that's before we're even talking to customers.
Yeah. Wow. Do you feel like a weight? Do you feel like you're carrying a weight?
Sometimes, certainly. I mean, you know, I I put a lot of stock in my work, no matter what.
Yeah.
I take a lot of pride in the in the product, not the Bereave product, but the product that comes out of anything that I'm working on. So I always feel a little
Yeah.
bit of weight from work, just from the own, I think my own, like, self-imposed pressures.
Yeah.
Um, but in this term, I don't know that I feel weight in that like we have to go solve this problem or else. But I think there is a almost a positive weight in that it creates momentum. These
Yeah.
these messages, as devastating as some of them are,
Hmm.
they often bring a lot of hope too, and we hear about a lot of hope from people as well, and
Yeah.
through their journeys. So there is weight, but
Yeah.
it's not like a weight that's going to knock you down. It's a weight that's going to get behind you and kind of keep pushing you, especially
Mm.
on,
Yeah.
days that are, that run long, in the startup world, and are at our stage of a company.
Yeah.
Um, so that momentum is something that I don't think I've ever felt externally
Mm.
from any company that I've worked for.
Yeah.
It is unique, and it is very dynamic, and it is a blessing for sure.
The image that comes to my mind when you're saying that is like being on the moon versus like jumping on the moon versus like jumping here and like having that weight to like
Sure.
to help you move versus like
Yeah.
holding you down.
Yeah. Totally. It is sometimes the absence of gravity, for sure, where it allows us to be propelled a little bit.
Oh, let's see. We could go. I feel like I could go. We could go in so many directions here. What what like when you were finding this opportunity or when this opportunity came to you, was there something that was like what aspect of it felt new and exciting besides like was there another aspect to it besides the cause that was new and exciting for you?
I mean, the I've worked for small companies before, but never one that had two full-time employees at the time, you know. Um so building is by far has been the most, um fulfilling endeavor that I've experienced at work, right? And that's not just at Bereave. I got to do it at a company called Lessonly. I got to do it a little bit at a company called Demandwell. I got to do it at a company called Switchfast. I got to do it when I had my own classroom. I got to do it when I was a salesperson, and got to build out a territory and build out, anything that I was working on, just putting those pieces together. So that is a very fulfilling endeavor. So, like, I knew that going in, which was
Yeah.
helpful. I've never had a CEO title, right? And it is interesting to have a title like this with a 3-person company, because it's not that big a deal. It feels like, because
Yeah.
we're all doing a ton of work, and it might hold more weight in the future for me. Um, but I think outside of the title, it's the responsibility that's there, right? Fundraising, learning about finance, context switching like crazy. Really thinking of the strategic direction of a company versus a department,
Yeah.
right? So like those things are new challenges for me, and incredibly lucky to have the network and the support system that I've got, or else I would be completely lost
Mm,
without having the folks around me that we've got.
yeah. It sounds like it's calling you to grow professionally too in a lot of ways.
No doubt. No doubt. I mean, I felt it right off the bat when I started about a year and a half ago, and starting to go through the first fundraise that I had ever been for. And it was a friends and family fundraise. So now I'm asking friends and family for money, right? And I've been asking people for money for almost 2 decades in sales roles. But for
Yeah.
some reason, this was a new muscle, right? I
Yeah.
had to learn about, financial planning, right? Working through building pro formas. I say building very loosely. I participated in the build. I did not build it. But just being able to navigate a lot of the finance things, a lot of the fundraise things, thinking about just all sorts of nooks and crannies of the business that
Yeah.
it's not that I hadn't been exposed to, but I had never owned before, right?
Hmm.
I owned revenue. I owned sales numbers, right? That was something that I had grown to wrap my head around. When you've got that plus, the marketing plus the finance plus the operations,
Yeah.
plus the partnerships, when you have all of it and you're staring at all of it, certainly challenges will help you grow really quickly.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you feel like there's like one specific area? You mentioned fundraising, but do you feel like there's like one specific area that you feel like has been the biggest challenge to grow in?
I mean, it's financial planning, like above everything.
Yeah.
And I do have the luxury of having one of our co-founders who was a non-operating co-founder. This is kind of his evening, his moonlighting gig. But he is just an incredible resource, not just a resource, but he's a pro. He's a VP of finance and operations in his background.
Yeah.
So building pro formas, helping think through, future expenses versus costs and revenue models, and building all of those out has been a massive help, but also a great opportunity for me to learn. I mean, we were texting last night, and he's, you know, I've got questions that probably would take me 5-6 hours to figure out.
Yeah.
He's whipping through in 15-20 minutes, and,
Wow.
and 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 delivering some level of insight. So that helps make some decisions.
Yeah.
So again, super lucky, but I think that finance, especially financial planning, strategic planning, on top of that has been a significant learning curve for me.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to that part you mentioned. So there's a lot of people that are reaching out to you guys like thank you for existing, thank you for doing all this. Like what is that like?
I mean, it's it's very humbling, first of all, right? I mean, you've got people that are showing up to your door and divulging some very vulnerable moments of their life,
Yeah.
and some of them in great detail. Um, it is an honor, frankly. Like we didn't know this was going to happen. We didn't expect this to happen. It's been a byproduct of our work, which is a great byproduct to have because it's really helped us learn. It actually helps us develop our product,
Yeah.
right? So it's not just like building a little bit of community and having a little bit of interaction with people who get it. Um, but all the time, I mean, people will share something that happened, and in that week, we will go into the product and we will make adjustments to our product to either help like eradicate that situation from ever happening again,
Yeah.
or to promote it if it's a beautiful act of from a manager or an HR team or an executive or even a friend, right? Like we want to be able to help recreate those opportunities in other people's lives.
Yeah.
And I'll give a great example of that. There was a woman who shared that she got back from, I think, like a 10 or 15-day leave that was from a pretty traumatic situation, and a loss that she suffered. And one of the things, as little as it was, in the actual gesture, meant all the world to her. She returned to work, parked her car, and the HR team and the managers had discussed having somebody meet her in the parking lot.
Mhm.
So somebody met this woman in the parking lot and walked her into the building so she didn't have to go in alone. So as we're building out our product, we've got these checklists for HR and for managers. And one of those considerations that people should make, as we recommend, is
Yeah.
recommend a buddy to meet them in the parking lot if they're
Mhm.
coming into the office, right?
Yeah.
So, and there are probably several dozen examples of that I could give, where we not only get to connect with people and hear their story, but they also are impacting the future of other people in the way they experience loss, especially at
Mm.
work.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds phenomenal too. And to like something is, I feel like on like a friend level, right? Like that would make sense so easily. Like, oh, like if my friend lost someone, of course, like I'm gonna be there for them. But like, yeah, I feel like in the corporate world, that might not click for someone. Like, oh,
Yeah,
like we should do this. We should show that we actually care about this person more than just like another number or something.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, some of the most empathetic people that you could ever meet might not come up with that, right? They
Yeah.
might miss that moment. But our job is to make sure that at the moment of impact, through the next, at least through the next year, that those moments are accounted for so that people don't have to think about them. Like they can
Mhm.
just start to happen because our system allows them to have to think about just doing the things versus like
Yeah.
having to think about what to do.
Yeah. Why do you think people open up to you guys so much about what's going on in their life? Do you feel like cuz to me when I hear that I feel like wow, do people not have community? Like I think it's on one hand it's great that like they feel like your product is serving something close to their heart, but on the other hand
Mhm.
like I almost hear that I'm like damn, like they're sharing like a like with all due respect, like a tech CEO, they're sharing this information with him. Like, do they not have like also family and community that
Mhm.
that can help process this grief?
Yeah. One of the wildest things that we've kind of had to wrap our heads around, and we're really still not sure how to actually like codify this and do something with it, but is the fact that like the Grievers Club is the biggest club in the world.
Yeah,
Yet so many people don't know that they're in it.
yeah,
Like don't know other people are in it, right? And a lot of it just happens because of the way we approach death, especially in the United States, but as a society, right?
yeah,
It's rare to talk about. When you meet somebody new, you talk about where you're from and how many kids you have and what your pets are like and
yeah,
all of these kind of like surface level type of things.
mm,
um, it's not like you're showing up and saying like, hey, who have you lost in your life, right?
yeah,
um, and it turns out, and I don't know if there are statistics here, but we've seen a couple of inferences to all of the uncomfortable things that people would prefer to talk about
yeah,
before they would talk about death. Like they'd rather talk about their personal finances, they'd rather talk about sex before they talk about
yeah,
death, right? Because now we have to address our own mortality, and that's a really, really, really scary thing, um, as we've evolved to this point. So one of the I think the luxuries that we're creating is an opportunity to kind of build that community, right?
yeah,
Um, I've been on calls with people who have both lost uh in the particular instance that's on in my mind, both lost their moms,
yeah.
both around the same time. They worked together and didn't know,
Wow.
but they found out on this call.
Wow.
And like you could see in their eyes, like they now had somebody to talk to at work
Mm,
about
yeah.
this topic. And it was kind of this beautiful moment that I was like, I kind of felt like I should step out, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
excuse me. But it's because it's not talked about.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, especially at work, the workplace hasn't made it okay to talk about. But
Mm,
as that door starts to open a little bit, people start to connect with each other. And it would be fantastic. Not that I don't enjoy connecting with people about their journeys, but it'd be fantastic if they didn't have to come to a stranger
yeah.
because they knew that there were people around them that were part of this club, that understood at least to some degree where they might be coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like also like a softer entry point for them. Like it's almost like safer knowing that like, oh, it's okay to talk about this here.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you saw it with mental health. Like in 2019, if you go to a therapist, you're blocking out your calendar and you're marking that private, and then you're marking two holds on the top and bottom of that calendar entry. And nobody knows what it is, but they know every Thursday you've got something blocked out, right? 2020 hits. We've got all sorts of things going on through 2020, 2021, where mental health becomes a very important piece to the work life,
Yeah.
right? Um, and now people have therapy on their calendar and it's public and it's open, and people talk about their
Mm,
therapist and they talk about their counseling journeys. And,
yeah.
and not to say that everybody does this, but it's much more widely accepted.
Mm,
Um, and a lot of that is because the workplace started offering mental health benefits and started talking about it and started bringing in
yeah.
people to talk about uh, things like empathy and in those moments, and talk about things like understanding burnout and trauma and those types of things, so that
Yeah.
an organization could be speaking the same language, right?
Yeah.
um, and now it's become okay in society. So I do have a belief that if these things, difficult discussions, whether it's death or menstruation, right, which is a big employee benefit right now. Um, uh, uh, I shouldn't say menstruation is a big employee benefit. There are companies out there that are helping support in all sorts of different angles in life. But when work makes it okay to talk about, it starts to become okay to talk about when you're outside of
Mm,
work as well.
yeah. It's almost like destigmatizing it.
Totally. Yeah. And it, I think, I think it starts at work,
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, maybe not every case, but I think that's a big piece of the puzzle. It also
Mm,
happens with some of the younger generations who are more vocal about those things and
yeah.
aren't as, don't feel as, uh, um, don't feel that there is stigma around them, that they are just a part of life.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. So when those two things meet, that's a perfect storm of allowing people to really start talking about difficult moments of life,
Mm,
hardship, and be okay having those
yeah.
public conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's such an important part of like our experience too, to be able to have, whether it's at work or in some sort of community or church or whatever, just to have like that group that you can be able
Mm,
to talk about what's going on. And for me, like while you're saying this, I'm also thinking about like when I lost my dad had he had esophageal cancer, and for the 8 months prior to his death, I was like, for me, I was like already starting the grieving process, because
totally.
when we found out about his diagnosis, it was like it was the end pretty much.
Mhm.
And like that whole time, I felt like I had nobody that I could talk to. Like I feel like I couldn't talk to my friends about it, because I
Yeah.
felt like if I brought it up, it would be like a burden. It would be
Sure.
like if I brought it up, they'd be like, "Oh." and then I'd feel
Yeah.
almost even like worse
Right.
about sharing it. So I mean, you could say what you want about like my friends at the time or whatever, but
Yeah.
like to me it felt like I felt like I had nobody that I could share this with. And
Mhm.
like even my family, like I had my sister on a few months ago or a few weeks ago, and
I
we
love
talked
that. I
about.
love that episode, by the way. That was
Thank you.
the first one that I watched. It was fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, so if you're hearing that, check it out.
Definitely should.
But yeah, I felt like even like in her and I were talking about this, like even within our own family, like we had different experiences of grief and loss to the point where like I felt like I couldn't even fully talk about how I felt with like my mom or my sister. And so I feel like, look, maybe like my hunch is that I'm not the only one who feels this way, but like I felt like so isolated in that
Yeah.
time. And like I felt like even when I wanted to try talk about it, I still had like so much trouble. And I think that like where I'm trying to come full circle here is that I think it's really important that people feel uh, empowered to be able to share these things as well, and like encouraged almost. Like, hey,
Sure.
you're hesitant. I see something's up. I know what's going on. Like, tell me. Like, no, really. I want to know what's going on in your life. And yeah,
Sure.
not to
So yeah,
say like
it's a great point.
push up. Yeah, go ahead.
And this the work that we're doing isn't just about like trying to help a griever be able to communicate.
Yeah,
Most of it is around the support system and trying to help the support system understand what they can be doing. And like even as basic of like what to say and what not to say,
yeah,
right? Because we we don't really know because nobody's
yeah,
really ever told us, right? I lost a friend when I was young. I think I was in 8th grade, and I went to her funeral,
wow,
and like I will never forget seeing her mom, and I knew her mom well, but I'll
yeah,
never forget like I stood in this procession line to talk to her parents, and it didn't cross my mind until I walked up to her mom about what I was going to say.
yeah,
And so what came out of my mouth, uh, and I'm sorry, I was a freshman in high school. She was in 8th grade. So she was, 13, 14 years old.
yeah,
What came out of my mouth to a mother who had just lost their 13-year-old daughter was, "How are you?"
yeah,
And and I didn't know that was right or wrong. I was fine. I was young, but I think that same element occurs every day from adults, people that are my age that are 44,
yeah,
right? I mean, I just went to my cousin's funeral a few weeks ago, and I saw my aunt and my uncle and his sister, and like I still had trouble in that moment. And I do
mm,
this every day,
yeah,
right? I talk to people about this every day. I still had trouble getting the words out of my mouth that I thought might be the right words because I didn't want to say the wrong thing.
yeah,
So
yeah,
the people like me, right? It's not just the griever, but it's also the supporting cast and helping managers, helping teammates, helping friends, helping neighbors
yeah,
understand like how they can step up, should they choose, and then actually what to do if they choose to step up in those moments.
yeah. Yeah, and yeah, something that I like I've been volunteering with this hospice company for almost 2 years ago or 2 years now. And like something that I noticed is just like sometimes like nothing is the best thing to say. And like
Hmm.
sometimes just like being there and saying nothing. And that doesn't mean to like not look at them, but to like be present with them, but
Mhm.
not necessarily have to say anything. And just
Yeah,
be in a space with somebody.
yeah, yeah, totally. And that is the hardest thing to like. It's the hardest thing to do because we want to fix something, right? Or we
Yeah.
want to say something, and we think that the grief is ours to solve in a lot of
Yeah.
cases, right? Um, there's this beautiful, I can't, and I'll have to find it, but there's this beautiful interaction. It's a podcast like this, two guys sitting in a room. One of them, I believe, is an MMA fighter who lost
Yeah.
his dad, and the host is a friend of his. You can tell that like they're at least personal buddies to some degree. And he asks him about this loss, and this big old MMA fighter starts to break up, and the podcast host says something to the effect of like, "Hey, buddy, it's okay. We can just sit here."
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, not many people know how to do that. It's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing when you do, and the hard part is like really understanding like what you can and can't and should and shouldn't do in those moments. And I think that's a lot of where these stories come in that people are able to deliver to us, is to be able to piece together some of that puzzle,
Yeah.
so that people next time know that they've got a place to go in Bereave, something to hold on to that will allow them to kind of navigate either supporting somebody
Yeah.
who's grieving or, grieving in general.
Yeah. Going back to, you mentioned that experience that you had when you were like 12 or 13 or 14. Was that experience that you had, was that in your awareness when you decided to take on this role? Was that something that you had consciously thought of?
It was, and there was a friend of mine probably a year prior, who died by suicide, and I remember that was like, I remember my mom saying like, "Hey, you have to go to this funeral because this is not the last time you are going to lose a friend, and you need to say goodbye to him, but you also need to understand what this experience is going to be like." So in a way, she was preparing me for the several funerals that I've been to since then, in my lifetime. Some premature losses, others you know probably a little bit more expected given age, but those, I think all of those, I think there was a moment where, because Elijah had lost his parents and Matt had lost his mom, I think there was a moment too that I'm like, hey, maybe this isn't for me because I haven't suffered as close of a loss as they have. Right. So, but then I went back and I thought about like all of them. Right. I thought about Lucas. I thought about Janelle. I thought about Mike. Sorry.
Oh, take a minute.
So like, yeah, I mean, all of these moments are in my mind on a regular basis. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes because it's almost a little bit of a, I suppose a little bit of a blessing. Like, I get to talk about other people's losses, which in turn eventually makes it okay for me to talk about my own, even though they were, decades ago, literally
Yeah.
decades ago. When I talk about
Yeah.
Lucas and Janelle, when I talk about Mike, like those are all decades ago. My uncle, decades ago.
Yeah. Wait.
But
I want to
yeah.
unpack that. Why do you feel that? Why do you feel that? Like, to me, from what you just said, it
Mhm.
sounded like that by working on this, that now you're okay. Now it's okay to bring that up and talk about that. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you?
I,
Yeah.
I mean,
Why do
I've
you
talked
feel
to,
that way?
I don't know that it's okay. I might have gone on a little bit of a misstep there, but because I've talked about my uncle Mike before.
Okay. Yeah.
I've talked about Janelle and Mike and Lucas and to some degree, but like, I'm probably a little bit faster to talk about my own personal loss now, right? Because and it's not that I don't think people have given me permission, but people have shown me that it's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Elijah has shown me it's okay to talk about losing his parents, and Matt talks about his mom, and and I've got a buddy named Nate who lost his mom, and one of the things that he said very specifically was like, he wants to talk about her, right? He wants people to ask about her. And there's always this perception that, you don't want to remind somebody that they have a loved one that's dead,
Yeah.
right? Um, but in reality, the opportunity to talk about them can be really, really soothing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it might be a little bit upsetting. I hadn't teared up thinking about those people that I mentioned earlier in a while, but like it's good to remember those times, and it's good to remember their faces, and it's good to remember their names. And people want it in
Yeah.
a lot of cases. Not every case, but in a lot of cases, people want to talk about their
Yeah.
loved ones. They want to share stories. And
Yeah.
so for me, like seeing how strong people can be, or my perception is that they're strong, and maybe that they're just more comfortable. I don't know what the right characteristic or word is for that, but like they've in a lot of instances made it okay for me.
Yeah.
I think they've helped make it okay for um, Elijah a little bit, and Matt for certain. But I think kind of to your point earlier, like knowing that there's a community, knowing that people understand it, like knowing that most people that you encounter have experienced some loss in their lives is a very comforting thing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like this whole time you're saying this, I'm thinking about like you're like you essentially have this product and this company that is changing how companies are dealing with showing up for someone who's going through the grieving process. But like what it seems like what you're actually doing is you're actually changing the way that people think about death and dying and starting that conversation.
Yeah, and that is a big part of what we have to do, right? And I think excuse me, I think it might be seen as like a byproduct, but in reality it is probably much closer to the core of our mission. We can't change the way we experience death without changing the way we think about it, without changing the way we talk about it, without changing the way we engage together and share together, and change the comfort levels, right? And
Yeah.
again, Bereave is not like we are not naive to think that we are going to be responsible for that
Yeah.
as a whole. But if we chip away at it a little bit, and other companies do, and other people do, and there's so many people out there really focused on like one niche segment of
Yeah.
the loss experience. What we've started to do is really bring a lot of these people together so that
Yeah.
there is a home base for resources and for tools and for um, experts to be able to get to people, or to have people get to them in their moment of need, right?
Yeah.
So um, a lot of that it feels like a big responsibility, but it's also again like a really big honor for sure.
Yeah. And it seems like it's almost bigger than like the mission you're serving is bigger than the company.
Oh, by far. Yeah. I mean, Bereave is not going to exist forever. The
Yeah.
mission will, right? I mean, we can always get a little bit better at it. I don't, we're never going to be perfect as a society around a specific topic. Um, but we can get as close as this company can take us.
Yeah.
And if that's for the next 40 years, great. If that's for the next 4 years, great. I think we've made a lot of strides just based on the messages that we've got.
Yeah.
But there's still just so much work to do.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like, because like the company is set up as like I'm assuming like or it's you just received funding, right? So there's like a venture capital firm that has like a huge stake. So like how does like
Correct.
with I feel like with like a cause and something like this, is there like my next question would be like, is there I don't know, how is there like where are some of the profits going to like the cause, I guess?
Yeah. Well, there are no profits right now, which is why we are fundraising.
Okay.
So, um, yeah, I mean, we are a mission driven for profit company, no doubt. Like, and I think early on, I think there were a few questions around like, hey, how can you go do this and still make money and feel okay about it? And I mean, I don't think they need to, I don't think a nonprofit has to solve this problem, right?
Yeah.
But the way we build this company, the way we address what needs to be addressed, the way we hire, our opportunity to, impact a local economy as we grow, create jobs, all of those types of things are really important. So it's even kind of beyond the mission, in determining what type of company that we're going to be to support, at the very least, our local economy, right?
Yeah.
Um, uh, you know, I, I think one of the things that we think about a lot is that, people who suffer loss are asked for their credit card a lot in the first 14 days or so, right?
Yeah.
They're asked to pay for a lot, a casket, a service, flower, like it just
Yeah.
the list goes on and on. You've been there, unfortunately, you know that. Um, one of our kind of core, I don't know, foundational principles, I suppose, is to not have people that are grieving or uh, are at the moment of impact
Mhm.
to have to pay for anything,
Yeah.
right? That, like, we don't want to ask them to pay. We might connect them to vendors that they are going to pay regardless, right?
Yeah.
We might introduce them to, uh, uh, you know, counseling opportunities, counseling companies, therapy companies that are out there. But we're not going to ask them for their money, right?
Yeah.
Their employer, on the other hand, should be thinking about their productivity, their retention of that person, the
Mm.
human side of showing up
Yeah.
as an employer, right? So their employers ultimately are the ones, at least in the strategy today, are the ones that will, um, sponsor the access to our platform for their employees,
Yeah.
and for their managers and for their executives and for their HR team, so that there's a holistic response. So we don't think those two things, like, profit and mission,
Yeah. Yeah.
have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And there's almost like a way of, not almost, but like there's a way of doing business that is ethical and win-win for sure.
Yeah, totally. And there is a responsible pursuit, no doubt. I mean, and that's how we select our partners. That's how we,
Yeah.
position our company. That's how we provide access to people. I mean, we provide access to people, whose employers are not customers. We
Mhm.
provide access all the time,
Yeah.
right? I'll get an introduction, to somebody who just suffered a loss, and the question or the statement is like, "Hey, I thought Bereave could help."
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. And in those situations, we just put people on our platform and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
uh, have at it," right?
Yeah.
And that's an okay thing. Maybe we go to their employer at some point and say, "Hey, we worked with one of your employees. Would
Wow.
you like
Yeah.
to extend this to other people?" Right? Like, that's an option. We haven't done that yet, but it's an
Yeah.
option.
I
Um,
th- that's I
our
think that's
Yeah,
something that's really admirable that you guys are doing too. Like the way that you are, like the product is one thing, but like the way that you're doing business is also, like it speaks volumes, Like no one who's dying wants to be like nickeled and dimed, you
totally,
know?
totally. And
And
think about, like, Jason, like,
yeah.
if you would have come to us, if sorry, if you'd have come to us, or if somebody introduced you and said, "Hey, um, Jason and his sister just lost their father, thought Bereave could help,"
Yeah.
and I said, "Jason, run your credit card. I'm gonna send you a link. Run your credit card, and then call me."
Yeah.
Like, come on, like,
Yeah.
that gets back to hearing the stories that I heard from our co-founders and our advisors and investors, and the stories that
Yeah.
they had been through. Like, that's what we're trying to eradicate, is
Yeah.
is that that way of doing business, right?
Yeah.
I shouldn't say we're trying to eradicate it. I should say that we're trying to be much more conscious of that experience. So rather than I mean, I've got probably 6 or 7 companies right now, companies that are in trials that have full access to our system because they were introduced to me through somebody because they had just experienced an employee loss, or somebody had suffered a significant loss inside of their company. And the first thing we did was take their email addresses and load them in to our platform. And we said, you can have this for 2 weeks, you can have it for 3, for 4, we'll figure it out together. But
Yeah.
let's get you started. Let's get on a call. We'll help you navigate this specific situation. And we'll come back to talk about a contract if you want to talk about a contract. But until then, like, let us know when you need help.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only way to reasonably do business
Yeah.
in this line of work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so fascinating. I've also noticed too, like when I like I'm in a, I guess, in a different position, but also like when I was, so like when I first moved to Austin, I was working at a production company doing like uh events. And then
Mhm.
from there, like once my contract was done, I started volunteering at this hospice company and got certified as a end of life doula, and or I'm finishing up the certification. Sorry. And
That's all
then,
right. All
but
good.
like I always like I thought about like a career switch because I wanted my work to
Mm-hmm.
be more fulfilling. And
Mm-hmm.
like for me, like I love meeting with people and talking with them and asking them questions. And for me, I was always, I felt discouraged from like doing uh like death doula work as like a way to make money. um
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that this is like if you do that and you make money that like shame on you, but I'm saying for me it's just like something in me just going through that experience like didn't feel right. And look, there, I'm not going to sit here and like defend an argument and say like there's an ethical way to, like, yes, there probably is, but like for me, like I did feel that. I just felt like this
Mm-hmm.
is not something that like I could do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I totally
and
get that, man. And right on for thinking about it. People have a choice on where they're going to spend their money. Uh, and hopefully, um, hopefully they've planned and their families have
yeah,
planned enough to know that that's one place where they're going to spend their money. In most cases, because we're so awful at planning for our future, like the demise of our lives,
yeah,
um, that it probably happens really quickly and people don't think much about it, right?
yeah,
Um, but again, like there are choices, and I think in those situations, to me, the hardest thing that I wrestle with is not like should you be paid or should you not be paid, but it's about the equity behind it. Like, not everybody's going to have access to a death doula because death
yeah,
doulas can be expensive,
yeah,
right? They aren't all expensive, but some of them are more expensive than others, and the accessibility piece is a tough one, right?
yeah,
But then so are funeral services, right? Not everybody
yeah,
has access to funeral services. So you ask, like, what are we doing with our profits? We have a lot of ideas on what we can do to give back as a company.
yeah,
We've talked about things like and maybe providing like death doula services, like
yeah,
something like that, right?
yeah,
Like a fund for death doula services for underserved populations. It could be helping pay for funeral costs.
yeah,
It could be working with companies like Faith's Lodge, who puts on weekend workshops for parents who have lost children.
mhm,
It could be working with, and helping fund experience camps, who works with children, who brings
yeah,
children into these camps who have lost parents, right? Like, there are so many ways that we can go out there and do good on top of doing good business.
yeah,
So hopefully you'll call me in a couple of years and want to do this again, and I'll have a really, really good answer on what exactly it is that we are
Yeah.
doing to give back.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I do you have are you saying that as you have to go or
No, not not necessarily.
Okay. Yeah.
But if you want that as
I
the outro,
no
fire
no no
away.
no no no. I yeah. Yeah. I think that's really remarkable the way that you guys are doing business, and I have I hope that like more businesses will start to shift into this mindset, or like I feel like it's yeah, I don't know how it'll happen, but to me it also sounds like it sounds like actually here let me retract this and ask this question. Like what is your this you're gonna think this is a weird question, but like what are your beliefs about the nature of reality?
It's a very vague and broad question, and I'll do my best to answer in the way I interpreted it. Um, I mean, the nature of reality is that it's a moving target, right? Because we're humans, and when we when we believe certain things, reality starts to and act certain ways. Reality starts to shift, right? And there's innovation, and there's new ways of thinking that haven't been done before, and so like we're always in a little bit of constant mode of innovating, right? So reality starts to follow suit. Now, as it relates to Bereave and the reality that we think we can make an impact on this problem, um, you know, the reality is that we already are. Um, and the reality is that we have an amazing opportunity. And I think like anybody who was working on any problem, if they're getting general feedback that is pushing them in the right direction, it's that they're
Mhm.
probably innovating something, and they probably are changing reality to some degree because of that innovation. I don't know if that was the right answer. I don't know if that's what
Yeah,
you're looking for, but that's what came out of my mouth.
yeah. I yeah, I would say more specifically like you, Justin Clifford, like
Mhm.
how does your because like here I'm not trying to like pin you in a corner here, but like why I asked this question is because I think that like the way of doing business this way
Mhm.
is more evolved, and I
Mhm.
think that there's just yeah, I think that there's something internal. There's an internal shift that needs to happen in order for
Mhm.
people to realize why business should be done this way. That's why I ask.
Yeah. Um, I think a lot about like going too far on it. Panera, as an example, and I don't know if they did this nationwide, but at one point, Panera did a pay what you can pay at certain cafes, and it
Yeah,
completely backfired on them, right?
yeah.
But they tried a new way of doing business,
Mhm.
right? Um, and I think about that example a lot um, because I think we can try new things on
Mhm.
a regular basis to see if things start to stick, right? It's a lot of trial and error, a lot of experimentation. And if you do it the right way, you can start to get some signals, right? Start to get some signals, start developing some trends, and then start moving towards what might seem like if you just made a switch that you're contemplating that is a drastic change from the way people do
Yeah,
business. That might be tough to do, but if you do it incrementally over time, as you continue to gain signals and continue to notice trends, I think it can be accomplished. If with the right motions and the right experiments. Um,
yeah.
maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this way of doing business is going to backfire on us. I just, I couldn't be the leader of a death tech company whose mission is to change the way we experience death,
Yeah.
and think we can't change that. Like, again, maybe we're naive, but we think the world is ready. It just needs a little bit of a push.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, those are all my questions. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed having you as a guest. So thank
Yeah.
you for this
Thank you,
conversation.
Jason. Thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for thinking about things a little bit differently as well. I know you're thinking about purpose a lot, you yourself, but also really understanding what purpose can mean to a lot of other people. And I think that starts to open up a lot of doors, and it gives people a lot of courage to be able to go make some changes themselves. So thanks for doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, I'll end it here.